and we could go down a path of that maybe another time.
Yeah.
Um, when you talk about, so I reached out to a couple of my buddies that are hardcore into CrossFit,
Mm.
and one of them, I'm going to mention in this. Hey, Pat Crosby. So he owns a CrossFit gym here in the Minneapolis metro,
Hmm.
and he does a phenomenal job. And I'm super proud of what he's been able to do. I was a part of it for a while. I got hurt, and I hurt myself, probably my pride more than anything, and fell out of grace of doing it just because I wasn't ready mentally for it. I don't think.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
lot.
and in full transparency, I own it, but it's called Sisu,
Hmm.
and he asked me to ask you a question, so I'm gonna.
Okay. Well,
And he wanted to know your take.
what's funny with the CrossFit thing, I've been kind of away from, like, we had a big kind of falling out with CrossFit in 2017. So we've been away from it, but it's interesting. I run into people that are kind of like well steeped in the CrossFit stuff, and they're always extremely complimentary. And like I went to Gabrielle Lyons, summit yesterday here in Austin, and I ran into Jimmy Letchford, who was a Marine, worked for CrossFit. Um, now he's the CEO of GoRuck, and I hadn't seen him in years, and we used to train together. And it's funny to run into some of these guys that, from those CrossFit days. And he introduced, then the people were there, he's like, oh, do you know John? And I introduced him, and he's like, like, this guy was like the biggest CrossFit Games competitor, and like went off. And he's like, it was funny because I hadn't thought about myself in that CrossFit circle in so long, but the people that are in that thing are always very complimentary, and there's always a very good kinship with them.
Yeah, he was curious to know, like, how do you think about goals and longevity? And
That's an
once you
interesting
hit
one.
a goal, to keep motivated to keep going.
Well, I think goals are important, but I'm real big on like small goals. Like, I think about dominoes, right? Like, if you stack a whole bunch of dominoes, you push one, and all of a sudden, as the energy increases, by the time you get enough dominoes, it'll knock down the Empire State Building. So I think what happens all too often, and we see this a lot within training and also within diet, where like, hey, I want to be sub 10% body fat, right? That's a good one to hear a lot. Okay, then what? Do you want to maintain sub 10% body fat, or why are you doing this goal? Well, I want to look good on vacation. Okay, great. So we're going to train you for vacation. What's the day after vacation? What do you want to do? People like all the time, hey, I want to squat 500 pounds, or I want to do this and this. So for me, my goals were always performance based. All the training, nutrition, physical, all that stuff was about making sure that the blade was sharp enough so I could go out and be successful playing football. And the habits that you end up creating in that, whether it be eating, sleeping, all that, like all these pieces are just becoming ingrained and become part of your DNA and who you are. So I've realized long ago that like goals are great, but habits and like consistency and who you are and what you do and what makes you at your ethos is really what's going to decide these things. I think it's great to be able to pick up goals. Like my training partner, who actually wrestled at Cornell, I was like, so what do you want to do this year in our training? And he's like, man, I'd like to be able to like bench 400 pounds. And I was like, have you ever benched 400 pounds? He's like, yeah, I did it in college. He's like, and I was like, well, I benched 400 pounds in college, and I benched 500 pounds in college. And he's like, do you think you can bench 400 pounds again? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't really tested it. So we started kind of doing 1RMs and testing it. And today it was like, I think, like, we're pretty close, like a lot stronger, but it'll probably take like 8 weeks to do it smart, to bench 405 and squat 500 and pull 600, which was kind of the goal. Like, how long would it take us? So just being able to kind of return to some of those strength numbers. But the other thing too is, about a year and a half ago, not a year and a half, just over a year and a half. It would have been a year ago this October. I was approached by a guy here in Austin, a guy named Shanji Ribeiro, who's like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend, about working with some of his young fighters. And so I started working with some of his young fighters. One of the guys is named Victor Hugo and Philippe, and some of his young fighters that are in their 20s. So he asked me to come work with them, and I've been training those guys. And Victor's like the top ultra in the world and one of the top guys in BJJ. So I started training them, and then I started training with those guys. So now I'm a blue belt in Jits, and go do that a couple days a week. And so that's been a new goal, is to, not only continue to train, but keep up with these, 47, to keep up with these 25, 26-year-old professional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu players who are, Victor 6'4", 260, an absolute monster, and some of these other guys. And then not only train them in the gym, so I'm able to give them some of the best strength conditioning on the planet, and then watch them go out and use it. And, it's been a fun piece to mentor, but also to see them really mature and grow into who I think they could be has been extremely fulfilling for me. And then also learning a new skill and humbling myself to like pick up and learn a new skill that I never thought I would learn. So I think the idea is like maintaining that neuroplasticity where I can go and learn new things, empty your cup, and teach and be a mentor, but also go learn either way, and not just be a old, stiff, crusty curmudgeon who can't go learn new shit. Because I think what happens you get too often is people are like, oh, I'm too old to do this, or I can't do this or this and this, and they just give you all the I can'ts and all the reasons they can't. My whole deal has always been like, I want to make sure that I'm able to train at a high level so it allows me to live my life to the fullest of my ability. And at 47, be able to go and roll hard with a bunch of young dudes. And when I see guys that are, do jits, especially as they get older, they have all these overuse injuries that could just be fixed if they just fucking lifted weights and trained, and didn't let themselves get out of shape and build zone 2 in this. And it's just like when I had the shop and when we moved here to Texas, I learned to fabricate and weld because there's a lot of stuff to do here on the ranch, and I knew I would not have the ability to call people. So I picked up the ability to fabricate and weld and build stuff, and I build trucks and do all this wild stuff. And, it's because, I'm a capable person. I'm physically fit. I can figure it out, and I'm not afraid to fail. So I try to take that little piece in my life, whether it's, running the track load or doing dirt work or, excavating this or building this, and, whether it be working with athletes or anything that I do, I'm constantly in this state of learning. And I find that if you're humble and you're intelligent and you're curious, you can get a lot of shit done very, very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Man, that's some serious wisdom right there of be humble, be intelligent, be curious. I like that. That's like a tagline for a t-shirt for you or something.
Yeah,
the power athlete.
Yeah, no, we they take our branding guy's been real good about different things that I've thrown out in podcasts. Like one of the original ones, I think one of the first podcasts I did was that barbell shrugged, where I used the move the dirt thing. Training's like
I like that.
Dirt.
Yeah,
that was 100% off the cuff. It was actually a adjustment for dirt, because where it really came from was when we were kids. My parents always burned a wood fire. So like once a year we'd come home and there would be like a cord of wood dumped on the driveway. And my mom would tell us like, hey, you got to have that wood stacked before your dad gets home at dark, because he likes to pull his car in the garage. So my brothers and I would go out there and we would stack all this wood on the side of the house. It was a whole court. And I remember my brother being like, just pick up a big piece or a small piece. Just don't stop moving. We got to get this done. And so that kind of analogy about moving the dirt kind of came from like my brother and I stacking wood. And so it was funny because my brother, who has never been on our podcast. I don't think he's ever done a podcast. He's a criminal defense attorney. He called me the other day because I guess some of his friends listen to the podcast, and then they'll go ask him questions. And he like got on there. He called me. He's like, I'm tired of these fucking people asking me questions. He's like, you've been bullshitting people for 10 years. Like, you don't want me to come on the podcast and I'll blow the thing up. But it's funny because he'll call me and he'll be like, hey, did you tell people on the podcast that we did this? And I'll be like, yeah. He'd be like, shit, dude. I didn't know if you were supposed to tell people that. Like, just funny stuff like that at the time was probably, like my brother woke me up on a Saturday one morning, and we like got on our bikes, our little BMX, single speed bikes. We were probably,
I remember those.
he was probably maybe 12. I was probably 9. And we got up at like 8 a.m, and where we lived in Palos Verdes, kind of Torrance, we drove down to the beach. And when you're on PCH, there's this tunnel called that basically takes you underneath the runway, and you drive under the tunnel. It's how you get to LAX from PCH if you're coming south. And so my brother and I rode our bikes, and it's like 16 miles from our house. So we rode our bike, and then we actually rode through the tunnel, turned around and rode back, and then we rode home. So like round trip, this thing was like 32 miles
on a single gear bike.
With no money, no phone, no water, stopping and drinking out of people's hoses, no lunch. Literally just
dude,
like,
let's go. Living the dream.
we left at 8 in the morning. We got home at like 5. My mom, like we came in and my mom didn't ask us where we were, nothing. Just like, like, hey, the barbecue's on, throw the burgers on. And we never, like we did it. And we never really talked about it. We didn't tell my mom. And so I told the story on the podcast, and my brother called me because some of his friends listened to it. He was like, the guy asked him, he's like, did you guys do this? And my brother's like, yeah, why? Like, where'd you hear that? And he's like, I heard your brother talking about the podcast. And my brother called me, and he's like, one, I totally forgot, but two, I can't believe we did that. And three, mom didn't even ask us where we were. So it just was, it's just a different time, like now, like my daughter like goes to school, like maybe a quarter mile from our house. And she called me and said, hey, can you come pick me up? And I was doing something in the backyard, and I was like, just walk home. She didn't make it like 10 feet before somebody gave her a ride. You can't walk around here. And I'm like, man, but it's just a different time.
It is a different time.
Instead of bitching about it, you just got to realize it's a different time. You chalk it up to that. Times are different. Things are different. I mean, the whole world is, like when we were kids, you remember like the milk carton with like the missing kid? Like I remember like the first time we got the milk carton with the missing kid, and then all of a sudden we heard, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if you remember it. I don't know how old you are, but there was like the McMartin preschool molestation thing, like that happened that was in like the 80s. I think it was in the 80s. That was all over the news. So then it was like, you're going to get kidnapped, you're going to get molested. I mean, and that's when I really remember like everything changing, where now all of a sudden like parents were this, and it's really, I mean, pretty awful stuff. But like, that was kind of a loss of an age of innocence,
Yeah. I'm not that much younger than you. I'm 42.
Okay.
Oh, not quite. I turned 42 in April. So
okay.
We're very similar in age, and my childhood was very similar. Like, it was the era of parents went to work, and during the summer it was like, I'll be home at 5. That was what the parents said to us, and so we grew up doing whatever we went and did. And one of my buddies and my buddies had mopeds, and I had rollerblades.
Yeah, yeah, we are about the same age.
So I would strap on my rollerblades, and we would rip and roar around the city, and you'd see this dude Zach hang on the back of a moped with his rollerblades on, and we would traverse through the city and do all sorts of
well
things.